Okay, well, I'd like to welcome everybody to the NutriCentre and thank the NutriCentre for allowing us to give a talk. We're going today to look at fertility, so nutritional advice for subfertility. I've got some handouts here you can take later, and there's a little booklet I've produced from my main book, which has got all the basic fertility information in. Plus there's a DVD of 8 case histories of women who got pregnant after following a nutrition programme. And also there's some of my leaflets, and the book you can order from here. So, it's endometriosis, a key to healing through nutrition. Well, a key to healing and fertility through nutrition, and it's printed by Thorsons. So I've got a picture of it at the end. They've just sold the last copy today. So, expectations. First you get married and then you have a baby. That's what most people think. This is from a lovely lady from South America. I want to have a child, whatever it takes. She wrote the book in 2004 because she was struggling so much to get pregnant with endometriosis. I'm Diane Shepperson-Mills. I can't find my pointy pen today. I am director of the Endometriosis and Fertility Clinic, a nutritional therapy consultant. My email is diane@endometriosis.co.uk, and my website is endometriosis.co.uk and makingbabies.com. So how did I get here? I had endometriosis. So I was quite ill, and I retrained. I'd done a degree in nutrition at Manchester University, and I retrained at ION, and I've since done an MA in health education, looking specifically at fertility and nutrition to see what's happening. And in October this year, I work as the chair for the Nutrition Special Interest Group for the American Society of Reproductive Medicine. And in October we're running a postgraduate day on preconceptual care nutrition for all the American gynecologists in the ASRA. So, we start with making babies. That's what we're trying to do. And the one fact we do know is that nutrition gives life to all living things. So that's the basis whereby we begin. And Belinda Barnes, who runs Foresight, the Association for Promotion of Preconceptual Care, has always said that putting a sorry-looking sperm into a starving ova and implanting it into a sick womb is a recipe for disaster. What we need is a healthy mother and a healthy father. We need healthy sperm, healthy eggs, healthy endometrium in the uterus, and then perhaps we might get the healthy baby we're after. So a healthy baby recipe I wrote for my book. Take a healthy ova, sperm, the womb lining. We need fresh air. We need clean water. We need nutrient absorption, because you could be eating really well, but if you're not absorbing nutrients properly through your digestion, they might not get to where we need them to be in the ovary and the sperm. We need to be relaxed, and we need natural daylight. And we have to mature the ova and sperm for 3 months. It takes about 3 months for the sperm and the ova to mature properly. And then we have to gestate it for 9 months at a temperature of 37 degrees C in a non-toxic environment. So we need a healthy baby recipe. So preconceptual care really is necessary. It's essential. We need a healthy egg to meet a healthy sperm in a healthy environment.
Endometriosis is as the inflammation of the womb.
Yeah, no, endometriosis is the womb lining that's growing on other organs of the body.
Yes,
I'm going to go through that later on, don't worry.
No, I just, because I thought everyone else would assume, everyone would know what that's all about.
No, I'm going to go through in detail everything as we go along. Because there are various reasons why fertility can be compromised, so I'm going to work through everything. So, essentially, you need to take 3 to 6 months to get yourself healthy and your ova and your sperm and your womb healthy before you start trying to conceive, because it takes 3 months for the ova to mature in the ovary. So we need fresh, nutrient-rich food. We need good quality fatty acids, the natural cis fatty acids. We need to try and avoid as many anti-nutrients as we can, heavy metals, chemicals. We need the fresh air and the natural daylight. It takes 20 minutes of natural daylight on the retina of the eye in order for the pituitary, hanging behind your nose like the size of a pea, to take in enough zinc to send the right message from the pituitary to the ovary. So all of this is very important. And when we're all working in offices like this, with no windows, and we've got unnatural light, you need to go out at lunchtime and have a walk round the block and get some natural light, especially in winter when you're going to work in the dark and coming home in the dark. And as much rest and relaxation and calmness as you can find, because when you're rushed and stressed, adrenaline and cortisol can affect the hormones, the fertility hormones like estrogen and progesterone. So what sort of babies do we make if we're having lots of food with food additives and xenoestrogens from pesticides and herbicides and fungicides, and we're taking in harmful chemicals like phthalates or bisphenol A, and we're having lots of alcohol? There were 3 14-year-old girls a few weeks ago were picked up somewhere in northern England by the police. In their carrier bag, they were carrying 92 units of alcohol that they were going to go and drink that night. Caffeine, too much caffeine, aspartame, there's research showing that can upset pituitary function. Street drugs, pharmaceutical drugs, too little fresh fruit and vegetables and proteins, and too many trans fats and too much refined sugar. So we've got to get a happy medium of what we're eating to make ourselves and hopefully the baby healthy. And Burke, and this is, where are we, 1943 I've had to dig to get this. Burke et al. Looked at mothers who had eaten good, excellent diets, and they gave birth to babies judged to be in good, superior health 94% of the time. Whereas contrasted with mothers whose diets were classified as poor, and this is 1943, they didn't have supermarkets then, or packet foods, the infants, their infants, only had good health 8% of the time. So there's a great difference between mothers who are healthy and the state of the health of their babies, as opposed to the mothers who are not as healthy as they could be, who are either eating poor diets, or maybe they're eating reasonably well, but their digestion's not working and they're not absorbing the nutrients. So we've got to start at looking at what we eat. And the rate of subfertility of couples of reproductive age in America and the UK is 15 to 20% of couples are struggling with their fertility. So this let's get married and then have children is very difficult for some people, and I want to know why it's difficult. 1 in every 5 couples are struggling to get pregnant. 30% of subfertile couples can be infertile as a result of endometriosis, which is what we said, where the womb lining is growing on other organs of the body and you bleed internally. 1 in 15 men and 1 in 10 women are judged to be struggling at present with their fertility. So something that should be as normal as anything on planet Earth is difficult for some. And not just because they're being silly, it's because of diseases like endometriosis, polycystic ovaries, poor digestion. Stillbirth, this was in one of the papers yesterday. 3 women a day in the UK are having a stillborn baby. 1 pregnancy in 200. Another piece of research says 1 pregnancy in 150. So 80 babies a week in the UK are being born stillborn. It's terrible. And it's death after 24 weeks of pregnancy is how they define it. And they're saying 98% of the 2.6 million stillbirths globally are in low and middle income families. And there are links to obesity, diabetes and high blood pressure. So the reasons for stillbirth, they're saying developmental chromosome abnormalities accounts for 10%, maternal complications such as preeclampsia, placental problems where the supply of nutrients and oxygen to the fetus can be reduced, obviously smoking, alcohol, street drugs, restricted growth where the baby is small for days, but that again could be placental problems, and poor antenatal care. So we've got to find out what's happening and try and stop it, because what everybody wants is a live birth, a healthy and vigorous baby, but also we want a person who lives to a healthy old age. I have grandparents who lived to 101, and my grandfather was one of 7, and those 7 babies lived from 94 to 104. So clearly their mother was doing something right. The adverse outcome is infertility, miscarriage, stillbirth, perinatal death, sick babies, things we wish to avoid. So we've got to find out how to have healthy people. Spontaneous conception rate. In 2,500 couples, 50% of the couples report a pregnancy within the first 3 years of trying. Whatever is done, half of the people become pregnant. The World Health Organization definition of infertility is the lack of conception after 12 months of unprotected intercourse. And most IVF clinics consider subfertility after 12 months. But we can see that within 3 years, around half the people fall pregnant naturally. So what's happening to the other half? This is the Maternity Alliance. 750,000 babies, 750,000 babies are born each year. 40,000 are born too soon and are too small. 1 in 150 babies, they say 1 in 150, not 200, are stillborn. 1 in 4 pregnancies end in miscarriage. And 60% of the miscarriages we know are due to defective sperm, not necessarily the woman. So healthy parents implies healthy babies, or vice versa. But once conception has happened, there's no changing what will happen. It's that egg has met that sperm, and that DNA is going to form. We think of conception as the beginning of life. So the egg and sperm collide, and the sperm has a head that's needs zinc, and the tail needs zinc and CoQ10 to help it swim. And once the egg is penetrated by the sperm, a calcium wave literally triggers straight around the egg to harden it to stop any more sperm coming in. So these things happen in the blink of an eye. It's a bit like watching cuttlefish in the sea change colour all the time. These things are happening in waves all the time. If you want to know what normal fertility should be, you look at the Hutterites. This was from Our Stolen Future with Thea Coburn. The Hutterites are a Germanic farming community in the USA, and they're used as an example of how high fertility can be when the population is healthy, stable, not using any contraception, and they produce on average 11 live births per married woman. You're a football team. And the rate of infertility is only 2.4%. So they're living a very different life. They're living a bit like the Amish, growing their own food, farming, but that's 11 on average children and only 2.4 infertility. Now this is where it gets intriguing. This is the bit I love the most. The egg that is you was produced whilst your mother was a fetus. Your mum's ovaries were formed inside your grandmother's womb. So the egg that is me was formed in 1926 when my mother was a fetus inside my grandmother. So I'm older than I think. So the health and diet of your mother and grandmother is all important. And at birth, women have around 1 million eggs as a fetus. They think it's about 7 million. We're a bit like goldfish. But by puberty, you've only got 400,000 eggs still viable. Still enough to fill a goldfish bowl. Each month, 5 to 10 begin to ripen, but only 2 or 3 make it to full maturity. And they grow to different sizes, and then one is picked up to mature when it becomes 28 millimetres, so like nearly 3 centimetres. But isn't this fantastic? So your egg that is you, was formed when your grandmother was pregnant with your mother. So we're all a lot older than we actually think. When my grandma said she was as old as her tongue and a little bit older than her teeth, she wasn't quite right. So fertility, there's an endocrinal mechanism by which the female of all mammalian species become infertile if food supplies are inadequate. We know this from the Dutch famine in the Second World War, because they were cut off from food supplies, and the women who were pregnant miscarried, some of them, and at one point they were actually eating tulip bulbs, which are very estrogenic, and high estrogen can act as an abortive. So it's all very fascinating. But the body, if you're struggling, the body can stop fertility at the expense of keeping you breathing and keeping you alive, keeping digestion and breathing. So the fertility side, the reproductive system, can be shut down a little bit.
But it can restart.
Oh, it can restart again, yes. The body is very clever, much cleverer than we are. Just thought I better put a bit in about sperm. 60% of miscarriages we've seen are due to defective sperm. 1 in 20 men are subfertile. This is from Niels Skagerbæk in Copenhagen, and he was in Denmark, in the British Medical Journal. Spermatogenesis in the human takes 120 days to recover if mutagens are around. So if the man is in an area where he's got nasty chemicals around him, and they damage the sperm, it can take 3 months before the new sperm are healthy and strong enough to produce a healthy baby again. So risks of low sperm, mothers who took DES, which is an estrogenic chemical during pregnancy, their sons may have low sperm. If the mothers ate a high-fat, high-sugar, low-fibre diet in pregnancy, and there's some research they're showing in preconceptual care that if the mothers were on a very low-protein diet at the beginning, after conception, the baby can develop heart disease in later life. So, we've got to get all of this correct. Multiple sexual partners increases risk of low sperm. Smoking, alcohol, street drugs. If you're using prescription drugs sometimes. I had one chap at one point who was on lots of cough medicine, and there were excipients in the cough medicine which were upsetting him. An exposure to chemicals in the workplace is seen to upset sperm. Long distance driving, so people who are driving long distances every day, men who are cycling all weekend get sperm that can be damaged, or DIY where you're working with chemicals. So working with chemicals, you need some ventilation. Also, we ought to look at chlamydia, because sexual transmission of the pathogen, it can mean that more antibodies are found in infertile couples as opposed to fertile ones. So apart from the diet side of things, couples also need to check that they haven't got things like chlamydia, syphilis, because 50% of infants born to chlamydia-positive women develop infections. So we need to get rid of any infections before you start trying to get pregnant. And obviously pollution. Research shows that some chemicals cause mutations to the sperm. Instead of their head being oval, it can become too large, too small, or pear-shaped. You get sperm with two heads or broken necks, and most sperm swim very quickly, and other sperm just dither in ever decreasing circles and don't know where they're going. The sperm has a negative electrical charge, and the egg has a positive electrical charge, so they can meet. But you can get chromosomal abnormalities if you're working in an environment with lots of chemicals. And of course, what have we got that our grandparents didn't have? We've got dioxins, polyhalogenated bisphenols, hydrochlorobenzene, dibenzofurans, and these concentrate in the fats and oils that we eat in our food. So meat and dairy food should be free from synthetic hormones and pesticides wherever possible. In the atmosphere, they come from incinerators and factories and fall onto the plants which we and the animals eat, and they concentrate in the oils. So what's changed? Well, in the 19th century, my grandma went into puberty when she was 17, in 1917. In the 20th century, it was 14 to 15 years of age on average. In the 21st century, they're saying it's more 11 to 12 years of age. And precocious puberty can be around 5 to 6 years of age. In Costa Rica at one point, they had a lot of young girls who were starting periods at 5 or 6, and they found that it was chemicals in chicken that they'd eaten, which was upsetting, putting up their estrogen levels and putting them weight on, because your periods begin when you have a certain amount of body fat. But many girls now, the teachers are saying, are beginning periods at 8 or 9 years. So way, way before it should happen. Now, endometriosis. I chair the charity for endometriosis She Trust UK. This is when the normal endometrium that grows inside the womb begins to grow in the wrong places outside of the womb. So every month you have a period, shed the blood, and then a new womb lining grows inside the womb in case you get pregnant that month. And then if you do get pregnant, it nourishes the little blastocyst for a while the placenta forms. If you don't get pregnant, it's shed again. So it's literally got a sell-by date. It's nutrient rich. It's there to help the little blastocyst survive for a few days while the placenta's being made. But with endometriosis, it's dastardly. The womb lining starts growing on the bowels, the bladder, the ovaries, the uterosacral ligaments, the fallopian tubes, and you bleed with the menstrual cycle inside the abdominal cavity. And boy, is it painful, because you're setting up inflammation inside the abdomen. So you can get pain with your period when you're ovulating, and some of us got pain all the time, every day. Some women form chocolate cysts on the ovary. So you get these cysts the size of grapefruit growing on the ovary, filled with brown, chocolatey blood, an endometrioma. And you can get adhesions between the organs that distort your anatomy. So if your body is the womb and your arms are the fallopian tubes and there's an ovary, if you get adhesions, it can pull the fallopian tubes and stick it all together like a cat's cradle. So you can get problems with trying to get pregnant because of all the chemicals in the peritoneal fluid, but you can also get problems if the ovaries are. My ovary was stuck to my bowel, and it's very nasty, very painful, and we wish it never happened. 40 to 60% of the women with endometriosis have fertility problems. This is where I always get cross with health services, because essentially if you've got polycystic ovaries or endometriosis, it is not your fault. It is a disease and you need help to get pregnant. Polycystic ovaries is different to endometriosis, but I do come across women with both. This is to do with an erratic menstrual cycle, and you become subfertile and you don't always ovulate every month. The women can have acne, they can be hirsute. I've had 18-year-olds who have to shave twice a day. You get weight gain on the thighs, hip and stomach. They get male pattern baldness, where they start going bald at the front, and skin tags and nigra, which is like a brown velvety skin. And it's due to, like a syndrome X, it's due to the amount of sugary foods we eat. That's part of it, but not all of it. The average American eats 145 pounds of sugar a year. In 1907, we had 12 pounds of sugar a year. But now we're having about 28 teaspoons a day. And we only need about 80 calories of glucose, about 3 teaspoons of glucose in the 8 pints of blood we have, in order for every cell in the brain to have energy. And 300 calories are stored as glycogen in the liver. But if you have insulin problems, which doesn't always have to be due to sugar, but it doesn't help, insulin affects ovarian function in the body. So if you have something that's going wrong with your pancreas and your insulin becomes too high, it has a steroidal function, and the ovarian hyperinsulinism produces too much testosterone, which in a woman, usually only the adrenal glands produces a little bit of testosterone. So instead of estrogen being produced in the ovary, we get too much testosterone, and that causes too many follicles to be stimulated. So instead of 1 or 2 follicles maturing in an estrogen atmosphere, you get 6 or more follicles starting to bubble up on the surface of the ovary. But because testosterone's washing around them, they're producing testosterone, the eggs in the follicles don't mature. They're not ripe, so they you can't have conception. They're not going to mature. So we can deduce that really sugar and chocolatey foods are not going to help fertility. An IVF, the present success rate is 10 to 40%. It is beginning to creep up, but with preconceptual care, hopefully it will be much higher. So we all need good food, fresh food. The University of Pittsburgh looked at restricted calorie intake, and they discovered that fasting for one day alone can change the suppression of luteinizing hormone in the body. So the implication for a slimmer was that even a short-term deficiency can have a profound effect on endocrine function. So women who are trying to get pregnant but are dieting at the same time are doing themselves a disservice. And we've said all the eggs a woman can ever make are created in the fetal stage of her own development. That's what we think we know. But there is some new research bubbling away which suggests that mammals like rats and mice are able to produce eggs throughout their life. So they're looking at this at the moment as to whether we are capable of producing eggs throughout our life. So we have to watch that and see what happens. So here we've got the pituitary, which is the size of a green pea, hanging in your brain. You've got the anterior pituitary, which is producing follicle stimulating hormone, luteinizing hormone and prolactin, which are protein-based hormones. And the posterior pituitary is producing oxytocin. And a message is sent to the ovary, which is the size of a walnut in its shell, essentially. And the outer layer of the ovary is full of all these 400,000 tightly packed ova, little eggs. There's a double blood supply. One gynecologist in Argentina has now shown there's a double blood supply. It's the only organ in the body with its double blood supply. And the follicle stimulating hormone coming from the pituitary tells the ovary to start maturing 2 or 3 or 4 eggs. So around each ova you have 2 million granulosa cells, and they're taking nutrients from the bloodstream and feeding the egg up, if you like. And at some point, one of the 3 eggs ova in the follicle becomes 22 millimeters, and for some reason we don't know, that's chosen to be the egg that will mature. The others are reabsorbed. So the ovary has a mechanism to reabsorb. And then once this becomes 28 millimeters, luteinizing hormone comes down and that membrane ruptures so that the egg can be released. If you get pregnant, it seals up and you produce this corpus luteum, the golden body. It fills with a golden fluid to produce progesterone. So if you fall pregnant, that corpus luteum and that progesterone maintain the pregnancy for the first 12 weeks, 3 months. So if this ovary is not well nourished, and that follicle's not working properly, that corpus luteum may fail to produce enough progesterone and you could miscarry. And then if you don't get pregnant, the corpus luteum's reabsorbed as well, and then it all starts again. So this is, I can't read this, Progress in Radiobiology. The highest susceptibility to nutrient deficiency in the female ovary is during ovulatory maturation and embryonic development. The first 30 days after conception are crucial. They also said there's a 70-fold increase in sensitivity in the ovary to nutrition deficiency that occurs, look at this, between 11:30 a.m. and 7 p.m. on the day before you ovulate. How fascinating is that? So you've got to be taking in the nutrients that your body needs to make this system work. So the ovum's hoovered up, if you like, into the fallopian tube, and somewhere around here it meets one of these WYSIWYG swimming sperm.
Sorry, is this after the 3 months?
No, I'm going back to after the egg's been released from the ovary,
Right, okay.
right? So the fallopian tube hoovers up the egg, and somewhere around here, one of the sperm that have swum all the way and are now getting exhausted meet the egg. The head of the sperm goes in, and this calcium wave hardens the outside shell. So it takes then 9 to 10 days for it to pass back into the womb. And when you see it on a camera, on a video, that little blastocyst, which is dividing cells all the time, it gets back into the womb and it actually rolls around the endometrium. It's very fussy where it's going to implant. I think it's rolling around looking for the right nutrient-rich spot. So you've got nutrients you need in the sperm, you've got nutrients you need in the ovary itself, and you've got to have a nutrient-rich womb lining, the endometrium, because it implants. And the implantation enzymes use zinc and vitamin E. And by day 19, after the sperm and the egg have collided, by day 19, it started to produce its own placenta to divide its bloodstream from its mother's, so that the nutrients go through by diffusion. So, you know, blink of an eye. You don't know you're pregnant day 19, do you? So, you've got to be eating well. So successful pregnancy, most of the defects in the ova leading to miscarriage are already present in the embryo immediately after fertilization, and they have their origin in the male and female ova and sperm before fertilization. This is why that 3 months before you're trying to get pregnant is crucial to the long-term health of the child you're going to have. So making a sensible lifestyle change for 3 months before trying to conceive to enhance chances of achieving a successful pregnancy is crucial. I mean, I would love all babies to be like my granddad, who was driving at 97, you know, going on holiday with his caravan on the back of the car in his 80s up to Scotland in April, coming back in October. They were healthy. There's a lovely book here I keep going on about called The Blue Zone, which is about elderly people in Costa Rica and Okinawa and Sardinia and Laura Loma in California, and how healthy they are, going and digging their fields in their 90s and growing their own crops. What we want is healthy people who have healthy old age, not people who are going to be ill. You know, there's research in Scotland looking at 80-year-olds, and they have actually tested their IQ and compared it with their joint matriculation that they did at the age of 11. And the 80-year-olds' IQs are higher at 80 than they were at 11. So So old people can be invaluable. We knew this in the past because the elderly were the ones who kept us alive. They had the knowledge. When it snowed or when there was a drought, they remembered that when their parents went through this, 6 valleys on to where the sun rose, there was water, or there were crops, or there was good grazing. So, you know, the knowledge is what we need. So we have a placenta, a whole new organ that's developing in the first month. So far from being passive in its transport of molecules, the placenta is a highly metabolic organ, producing 60 enzymes of its own. So it's not just a piece of tissue, it's working. It gathers up maternally produced hormones, the nutrients from the food she's eating, and forces them into the fetal bloodstream to keep this baby growing and alive. So if you've got a small by dates baby, it may be that the placenta hasn't worked as efficiently as it should, and the baby's not had the nutrients that it needs. Because look how quickly the placenta develops. If it develops poorly, what happens? If the placenta develops poorly, no matter how well the mother eats later on, her unborn baby will not receive optimum nutrition. So this first month, 2 months of being pregnant, we've got to get this all working, and we've got to have a healthy egg, sperm and endometrium to start with. So you think of the womb lining, the endometrium, as a nest. Each month the womb lining develops and fills with lush, nutrient-rich, blood-engorged tissue. And if the mother's diet that month is poor, a weak placenta is less likely to sustain the embryo. The baby could be low birth weight, or you could miscarry. Both the ova, womb lining and placenta are dependent upon nutrient intake. I had a 4-month pregnant girl sent to me by the gynecologist because she wasn't thriving, the baby wasn't growing, and she had ice cream and cream crackers for breakfast. She had a pot noodly thing that you poured boiling water in for her lunch, and she had something on toast for her tea. Now what is missing from that? No fruit, no veg, other dried little bits. You know, think logically. Healthy baby, healthy food, green leafy things. So this is the Dietary and Nutritional Survey 1990 in British adults, Her Majesty's Stationery Office. Persons eating affected by being unwell, which contained 9.5% of women in the age range 16 to 64, reproductive age. Calorie and nutrient intake was 18% below average, and 10% of those women may not be eating well enough to sustain a pregnancy. So we have problems with obesity and fertility, but we have big problems as well with people who are dieting and too thin. Maybe not because they're dieting, maybe because their digestion is not good and they're not absorbing. So where do we go? Well, we go to farming. We go to look at veterinary medicine because they know. So animals, all mammals on planet Earth, conceive on a rising body weight, not when weight is falling. All animals have a fertility threshold, and in farming there still exists the practice of flushing. The practice of giving ewes, sheep, in a fairly poor condition an improved diet, amazing, for a few weeks before mating, before they meet the ram. So in veterinary medicine, if they're trying to get an animal pregnant and they want to make money from a healthy sheep calf, goat, pig. They make sure that the mother is healthy before she's put to the round. And flushing means supplying all the essential nutrients to make the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland and the ovaries provide an excellent hormone profile. Now tell me what is more logical than that. And Craig Sams said in his book, The Little Food Book, a sick animal is a financial loss to a farmer, whereas a sick human represents income opportunities. Animal feeds are carefully mixed to ensure that nutrient deficiencies are minimised. When we have the Bluebell Walk at Bates Green Farm, all the sheep and the little pigs and little goats are given licks, things that they can lick to take nutrients from to make sure they've got everything. But human food is often depleted of vital nutrients. And at this point when I was writing my book, I had a lady vicar I was working with. And she said, look in the Bible. We know that the Maasai tribe has specific times for marriage to ensure that the bride has a few months on a nutritious diet. They put all the girls who are going to get married into a hut in the village, and everybody in the village feeds them to make sure they've got lots of nutrients. And Queen Esther in the Bible underwent a special diet for a year before her wedding. Leah became pregnant after eating mandrake roots, which were believed to promote fertility. I don't think we should. In Judges, an angel gave preconceptual advice to Samson's mother. Take care not to eat, not to drink any wine or beer and eat any forbidden food. So even in those days they were giving preconceptual care advice, even the angels. So there we go. So low weight can upset fertility. The Wynns, Arthur and Margaret Wynne, in their book, which is the case for preconceptual care in men and women, state that nearly 80% of infertile women have been judged to be underweight. In order to work out your BMI, you divide your weight in kilograms by your height in meters squared. So it's called the body mass index. The pre-pregnancy weight is a risk factor, with the risk increasing as the BMI falls below 24 kilograms per meter squared. And US data shows that there's 50% of infertile women are below a BMI of 20.7. And 73% of women with a BMI of 20 or below suffer miscarriages. And at Hackney Hospital, mothers of the healthy weight babies with Wendy Doyle's department, on average their BMI was 23.7, so a good Marilyn Monroe. And if we look at McCann-Widderson data and compare food from 1937 to 1991, just for magnesium, the raw carrots were 75% less magnesium in them. Celery was 50% less. Potatoes 32% less, and tomatoes 36% less. I remember Craig Sams saying in his lecture he grew up in Nebraska when he was a boy, and the topsoil in Nebraska was 8 meters in depth. And that's going back to the 1920s, whereas now in Nebraska you've got 18 inches of topsoil because of the way they farm with big fields. All the good soil is washing away. And of course, if it's been over-farmed, you've got less nutrients in the soil. So your choice of foods, well, nutrition in both partners we can see even before pregnancy has a profound effect on the egg and sperm, and on the nature of secretions within the peritoneal cavity. and which oils and fats are eaten affect the production of the prostaglandins, the cell membranes, the steroid hormones, the neurotransmitters. So we have to eat as well as we can afford, the best quality food we can afford. And obviously moderation's a key. You don't want to eat too much of one thing at the expense of another. And there is research, I can't see this is in German, this is German research. A high and low protein diet causes fewer ova to be ovulated. Research suggests that 3 ounces, 75 grams a day of protein is adequate. The number of eggs ripening is reduced, or ovulation is stopped if the amount of protein in the diet is insufficient. And this system requires riboflavin, vitamin B2, pyridoxine, B6 and biotin to metabolize the proteins efficiently. So if you're deficient in B2, B6 and biotin, which healthy gut flora make, then maybe that metabolism of the protein doesn't work so well as it should. So our good food. Then of course you come to the food allergies and intolerances, and Archibald Garrod in 1908 stated that one man's meat is another man's poison. He recognised then that we're all unique individuals, and what one person can eat and not make them ill, another person can eat and it makes them unwell. So something's going on. So we need to also look at what that is. So subclinical autoimmune disease may be involved with reproductive failure. So we need to look at what food allergies, chemicals upset the immune system. But certainly 44% of women who miscarried were seen to have antibodies implicated with anticardiolipin. Now, they will only test for anticardiolipin if you've had 3 miscarriages, which I think is all fair, except if you've been trying to get pregnant 3 or 4 years and you've had 3 miscarriages, you get tested. If you've been trying to get pregnant for 12 years and you've never had a miscarriage, you don't get tested. But thyroid autoantibodies are also implicated because they're used as a guide to point at women at risk for miscarriage. So women also need, if they're having early miscarriages, they also need to have thyroid autoantibodies tested. And complement and miscarriage, 20% of first trimester pregnancy losses are characterized by hypocomplementemia. And complement is a white blood cell which fights viruses, bacteria. Complement activation is required for recurrent fetal loss associated with antiphospholipid antibodies. So you've got anticardiolipid antibodies, antiphospholipid antibodies, and autoantibodies to the thyroid. And if you have high readings for those, you can have early miscarriage. So they need testing at some point if people are struggling with fertility. There's also celiac disease and subfertility. Celiac disease is a genetic trait. It's common in Nordic people, in Celts, and in Ashkenazi Jews. And it does interfere with reproduction. It gives you gluten sensitivity so that the villi in your small intestine are eaten away by glutens. There's a high prevalence of infertility in people with gluten sensitivity, regardless of which spouse has celiac disease, whether it's the man or the woman. The mother is likely to experience recurring miscarriage, premature birth and low birth weight. So something else that needs testing if people are struggling with their fertility. And 14% of women with celiac disease were found to have thyroid disorders. So thyroid, celiac, antiphospholipid antibodies, anti-cardiolipid antibodies need testing. Another lot, research on thyroid autoantibodies, has shown that the use of selenium, 200 micrograms per day, for 3 months had significantly reduced the concentration of the antibodies in women with thyroid autoimmune disease. This is in thyroiditis biofactors. And estrogen and thyroxine. Estrogens do acutely inhibit the rate of hormone release from the thyroid in adults, but the effect's transient. Estrogen and thyroxine are antagonistic hormones, so if your estrogen is very high, it can push your thyroxine down. If your thyroxine is very high, it can push your estrogen down. And estrogen at very high levels can act as an abortive. So autoimmune thyroid diseases are thought to be involved in infertility. I've had people often coming with hyperthyroid and hypothyroid, and it's one of the first things you need to correct, because thyroid autoantibodies predict women at risk of miscarriage. So what are we going to do? We want fresh pesticide-free foods for our diet if we can. Well, going back to Wendy Doyle's research at the Hackney Hospital with the weight of new babies, what was happening to these new babies? The mothers of the low birth weight babies had been eating meat products, white bread, refined sugars, soft drinks in greater amounts. The mothers of the healthy weight babies had been eating nutrient-rich foods. Not a word about calories, nutrient-rich foods. Foods that contain plenty of nutrients. 3 regular meals a day. Breakfast being the most important because you've been fasting for 12, 14, 16 hours. Whole grain cereals, muesli, oats, nuts and seeds, daily. Handful. Eggs, egg dishes, wholemeal bread, unless you've got a gluten sensitivity problem. Dairy foods, unless you've got lactose intolerance. And lots of fresh fruit and vegetables. Dr. Paul Clayton had done research. He is fascinated in why these elderly people are now living to 100 and beyond. We've just buried Elizabeth, and she lived to 105. And at 103, she would be cooking apple and blackberry pies in her kitchen, keeping a quarter for herself, and giving the rest to the old folk, which I think is wonderful. So this is what we want. So it's what you're eating, and your mum's eating, and your grandma's eating. So the Hackney study with Wendy Doyle showed that the hypothesis that the diet of the mothers of low birth weight babies had far too few nutrients from their diets was supported. These women were not eating enough nutrients. They were eating high calorie foods, low nutrient foods. If the mother's nutrient deficient, the fetus is going to struggle to survive. It needs nutrients, not to be starved of them. The University of Mississippi, and this is 1982, you have to dig for this stuff. Fertility was restored after nutritional counselling in 19 out of 26 women who conceived spontaneously in due course after they'd had a talk about nutrition. All the women had been underweight at the outset and were encouraged to gain ½ a pound a week. No drugs were prescribed. You remember we said earlier on that mammals on planet Earth all get pregnant on a rising body weight, never on a falling body weight. So just trying to gain a little bit. We don't want anybody to go fat and overweight, but you need to be putting on a little bit of weight. So if you're overweight, you need to reduce your weight down and then start trying to get pregnant. If you're underweight, you've got to eat nutrient-rich foods. And of course, correct your digestion. Because in this room here, there are lots of books on how to lose weight. There is only one book on how to gain weight. Because some people have what I call hollow leg syndrome. They can eat for England and not put on a pound. But are they absorbing? So, just from talking to people and getting them to understand that diet is crucial, you can improve fertility. What are we going to eat? Dark green leafy vegetables for flavonoids and indoles. Red vegetables for carotenoids, because it's not just vitamins and minerals, we've got all these phytochemicals. Black red blueberries for proanthocyanidins. Oily and white fish for eicosapentaenoic acid. Lean meat, preferably pasture-fed, hormone-free. Nuts, seeds and pulses for ellagic acid, also raspberries. That's something else Elizabeth used to do. You never went round to Elizabeth's house and saw her eating sweets. She had punnets of raspberries, and she'd be eating raspberries like sweets. Linseed, walnut and olive oil, the unhydrogenated extra virgin oils. What should we be avoiding or reducing? Smoked and processed foods, because they set up free radical damage. Fried food, and there is research saying gossypol from cottonseed oil inhibits sperm production, and cottonseed oil is used in prawn and Indonesian crackers, so little bits but not lots. Excess wheat, soy, citrus, linseed, licorice, because they're estrogenic, don't overdo it. Excess red meat and dairy, especially if they've got, as in America, growth hormone. And you don't want too many antibiotics, or real antibiotics won't work when you need them. Peas in excess contain a chemical which causes sterility in the male. That was research done in India by an Indian gynecologist who didn't understand why men in Tibet only had 2 children, when in India they had more. And they found that they eat lots of peas, and this chemical was causing sterility. Chemicals unnecessary to fertility, I think I've done that once. We're not sure. You see, the problem is you can't do research because everything's in a cocktail. You can't eat one thing, and you can't do the research and give a pregnant woman one thing. So you've got the additives, pesticides, refined sugars, artificial sweeteners, xenoestrogen, pesticides, phthalates, bisphenol A, street drugs, pharmaceutical drugs, and trans fats. When they're all mixed in a cocktail, we don't know what they do, really, together. There's some other research. 1 in 7 women have below normal iron levels. And this is findings from the Nurses' Health Study. And it showed that low iron can derail ovulation and make it difficult for the embryo to thrive. And the research looked at what sorts of iron you needed to help, and it was non-heme iron from fresh fruits, green leafy vegetables, beans and supplements which improve the chance of getting pregnant. And they looked at the human ova and the granulosa cells that are around each ova carry receptors for transferrin, which is a protein that ferries iron through the bloodstream to where it needs to go. And the receptors let the ova take iron from the bloodstream and store it for future use. And the granulosa cells could also make their own transferrin and send it to the ova. And they realised that the ova needs iron for the DNA and for the protein synthesis that happens after the egg and the sperm have collided. And dairy foods, the research was looking at how that has changed. In 1900, the average cow produced 3,000 pounds of milk a year. In the 1950s, the average was 5,300 pounds a year. Today, a cow produces 18,200 pounds of milk a year, 2,100 gallons, and the cows are milked 300 days a year, being pregnant most of the time. And being pregnant puts different and extra hormones into the milk. So milk from a cow in the late stages of pregnancy contains up to 33 times as much estrogen as the milk from a non-pregnant cow. So the Nurses' Health Study, they looked at whether milk was helpful, and they said 1 serving per day of full-fat dairy milk decreased the chances of having anovulatory infertility, where the ova doesn't mature. So they said aim for 1 or 2 servings a day of organic dairy food. Obviously not if you're lactose intolerant. So what have we got to do? In the old days, you breakfast like a king, lunch like a prince, dinner like a pauper. Now we do it the other way round. We have a big meal and go to bed, instead of having a big meal at breakfast and working it off through the day. But we should have 3 regular unhurried meals and 2 nutrient-rich snacks a day. Shopping frequently, it's no good going around the supermarket, putting your fruit and veg in the trolley and stuffing it in the bottom drawer of your fridge for a week, because the vitamins will go off to Alpha Centauri and outer space and not go in you. So shopping frequently for fruits and veg is important. And the other thing with the research that Paul Clayton was doing, when he was looking at these people who are living to 100 now, questioning them what they ate, was that they grew up on stews and casseroles and broths, where the nutrients were in the gravy, not thrown down the plug hole as we do now when we're boiling vegetables. So trying to make casseroles and broths. This daylight walk so your zinc's absorbed. Using unrefined, cold-pressed, unhydrogenated oils like the greenest extra virgin olive oil you can find. Drinking plenty of fresh filtered mineral water, and trying to do more like a hunter-gatherer diet. I noticed yesterday in the paper they were showing Tom Jones had lost weight. And what had he done? He'd followed a hunter-gatherer diet, eating fresh food. So a normal menu: cereal for breakfast, probably wheat with some milk, toast and jam. Mid-morning, Kit Kat and a coffee. Lunch, a cheese sandwich, piece of cake or a chocolatey biscuit. Mid-afternoon, tea and biscuits. Go home, have some pizza or pasta and a Coke and some ice cream. Maybe sit and nibble some crisps. What's wrong with that? Can you find any fruit and veg? Maybe some on the pizza? You know, not enough wheat there, wheat. Too much wheat in one day. So what do we want people to do? Perhaps a smoothie or some fruit or a fruit salad for breakfast, or a fruity yogurt, herb tea. Mid-morning, handful of nuts and seeds and a glass of fresh water. Lunch, a salmon salad, some fruit, tea with lemon to help your liver. Some sort of oaty, flapjacky bar that you've made yourself with some blueberries in and some flaked almonds and half the amount of sugar the recipe says. Go home, chicken in lemon sauce, bit of broccoli, grilled tomato, red and green, some new potatoes, some berries, cream fresh, and a few seeds and some elderflower cordial before bed. Nutrient-rich diet, as opposed to a nutrient-poor diet high in fats and carbs. You know, not enough protein. So, what to eat? A litre of fresh water, 2 servings of green leafy veg, 2 servings of red or orange yellow veg, 2 portions of fruit, a portion of whole grain. If you're not celiac, wheat, rye, barley, oats, spelt. If you're gluten-free, rice, corn, millet, buckwheat, which is rhubarb family, tapioca, arrowroot, quinoa. Some root vegetables, maybe turnip, swede, carrot, celeriac, potato. About a tablespoon of extra virgin olive oil in your salad dressing with some chopped fresh herbs or some cumin and coriander and some lemon juice. 3 ounces, 75 grams of protein, lean meat, fish, nuts, seeds, legumes, peas, beans, lentils, eggs, some dairy food. What more do you need, really? A bit of honey to sweeten your something, fruit salad. So what to avoid? Anything that upsets your immune system, anything that you know that when you eat it upsets you. If you eat dairy and it causes diarrhea, if you eat wheat and it causes constipation, you need to check that. Tests for allergies and intolerance. Obviously, if dairy, lactose or casein upsets you, you avoid animal dairy. If you have celiac disease, you avoid all gluten grains. You don't need much alcohol. Weddings, birthdays, Christmas, street drugs or too much caffeine. We don't want much pesticide. We don't want phthalates and bisphenol A plastics around our food. We need to keep trans fats as low as we can and excess sugar and aspartame. Hunter-gatherers had honey or maple syrup or xylitol from silver birch. Fish, deep sea oily fish, so it's not too much pesticides. Wild Alaskan salmon, Pacific halibut, mackerel, anchovies, some white fish like haddock, cod, hake. And avoid fish that's linked to high mercury levels like swordfish and some tinned tunas. And then basic supplements. 55% of all women in their childbearing years reported taking a vitamin and mineral supplement, rarely or occasionally. Research showed that women considered at the highest risk for nutritional inadequacy had the lowest rate of supplement use. So if you're going to choose to take some supplements, you want pure ones, food source ones, free from wheat, gluten, yeast, lactose, sugars, petroleum byproducts. Little or no vitamin A and E. Fish oils should be free from pesticides, they should have been cleaned, and you personalise them according to your need, not a protocol. We use functional medicine and do tests to see what you're low on. Clearly, as I keep saying, we have to correct digestion. You could eat organic food every day of the year, but if you're malabsorbing, if there's something wrong with your digestion, the nutrients won't go where we need them to do, so we need to correct that. Homocysteine levels can affect miscarriage. 5,800 premenopausal women, 40 to 42 years of age, those with high homocysteine levels were 31 to 101% more likely to have pregnancy complications. Birth defects like neural tube defect occurred frequently in babies of the mothers who had high levels of homocysteine. This is the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. So homocysteine indicates, if it's high, that you're low in nutrients like B12 and folic acid. I had a lady came to see me today and her doctors refused to do this test despite the fact she's had 4 miscarriages. It also damages the placenta, then DHA from the omega-3 oil cannot be absorbed. A Danish study concluded that high homocysteine or low folate can indicate risk factors for repeated early pregnancy loss. There is 3 to 4-fold greater risk of suffering further miscarriages if you have high homocysteine. If it's tested and you're given B12 and folic acid and it brings it down, you're probably going to continue a pregnancy. So the nutrients the B2, B6, B12, folic acid, zinc, omega-3 oils, trimethylglycine and magnesium that you need to check. For sperm, zinc is crucial to the head and the tail of the sperm. All the references are in my book. B12 is used to support DNA and improve motility of the sperm, make sure it can swim fast enough. Vitamin C for sperm motility. It's higher in seminal fluid than any other area of the body. It reduces the sperm sticking together. L-arginines for cell replication, L-carnitines for fatty acid transport into the sperm mitochondria to help motility and speed so they stop dithering, and Panax ginseng increases sperm formation, and CoQ10 gives energy to the tail of the sperm. To help the ovary, uterus and pituitary, you need a multivitamin with around 400 UGs of folic acid. In America it's 800 to synthesize the DNA and RNA, and at no more than 2000 IUs of vitamin A, because it can cause floppy baby syndrome. The baby's bones don't go hard enough. A B complex vitamin, which usually there's enough in the multi. Zinc for implantation and brain development. Vitamin E for implantation. It acts as an antioxidant and it can stop free radical damage at the cell membrane. Omega-3, 6, 9 for hormones and cell membranes. Magnesium, calcium, vitamin D for bone strength and nervous system development. And again you would do blood tests, urine tests, analysis to see if the person's deficient. Iron for energy and oxygen transport, and acidophilus to make sure the healthy gut flora is producing the B vitamins that we need and helping the immune system. How am I doing for time? Nearly there. So vitamin C, research suggests vitamin C potentiates the use of fertility drugs that stimulate the ovary, like Clomid. B complex, I think I've done about that. Low intakes of B's depress gonadotrophin releasing hormone from the pituitary, secretion from the hypothalamus, and affects the development of the egg and the sperm in the gonads, the ovary and testes. So if your gut flora is not making B vitamins and you're not taking them in, you have a problem. Vegetables make the main contribution to vitamin intake. So that diet we looked at where there was hardly any vegetables wasn't going to help at all. Endocrine nutrients, I think I've already done this one. B2, B6 and biotin help a lot. And deficiency of B1 inhibits ovulation. And there was research in Switzerland showing that 23,400 women, 3/4 of them were low vitamin B1. B vitamins, magnesium and zinc are important for the hypothalamus, the starting process for reproduction. Other research papers I've got at home, one of them shows that iodine is crucial for the ovary. And omega-3 fatty acids from fish oil prevent blood clotting, they thin the blood. And many women are placed on aspirin to prevent blood clotting. But if you look in the Drug-Induced Nutrient Depletion Handbook by Elsevier, if you're on aspirin, it depletes the body of folic acid, iron, vitamin C, potassium and sodium. So you have to make sure that everything is correct. Zinc, pregnant women with the lowest levels of zinc had more complications in pregnancy than women with the highest level. Women with zinc malabsorption and low blood levels of zinc have an increased risk of having malformed child. And follicular fluid they were looking at in 120 women for melatonin levels, because concentrations of melatonin and progesterone during autumn and winter, when it's dark, were higher than those in spring and summer when it's light. And estradiol concentrations were significantly lower in dark months than in light months. This is from the journal Human Reproduction. So results suggested that melatonin may be involved in the regulation of steroidogenesis by the human ovaries. So even the seasons and the light is affecting hormones. And I wish I had my book here because I wanted to read it. The defence of mothers is the defence of the nation. There's a wonderful quote, which I can't read you now because the book's not here, but it's saying that if we want a healthy nation, we have to make sure the mothers and fathers are healthy and have healthy babies. I work with MyMOP, Measure Yourself Medical Outcome Profile, a clinical audit. So the women fill in 2 symptoms and activity, their well-being, the medications they're on, the supplements that they're taking, and dietary changes and adverse events, so that I can look at what happens to the women I work with. And 198 women treated for endometriosis over 3 to 6 months with nutritional therapy. The fertility range that we had was 52% in women between 35 and 47 years. These are women often who'd failed IVF. So there was a significant 50% reduction in pain scores on average. 86% of the women found wheat was the pain trigger, and 52% of them fell pregnant. So make your dreams real. If you've built castles in the air, your work doesn't need to be lost. That's where they should be. Put your foundations, your nutrition foundations, underneath them. Go to your GP. If you are working, you have paid for tests. If you're constantly miscarrying or can't get pregnant, thyroid, female hormone profile, check if you think that lactose, milk upsets you. Check if you think wheat upsets you. Are you gluten sensitive? You need to check your iron levels, your vitamin D. Now, vitamin D isn't a true vitamin. It's a pro-hormone. It's the stage before hormones are made. So if your vitamin D is low, perhaps you're not making estrogen and progesterone properly. Test for sexually transmitted diseases. Can the doctor check your mineral and B vitamin levels so that we know where we're starting? Laughter is the best medicine. There was a wonderful chap in California who was diagnosed with terminal cancer. He had 3 months to live. So he gave his company to some of his friends, and he went off and he bought himself silly videos, DVDs, watched them for 3 months. At the end of 3 months, the cancer had shrunk and gone away. So we know from research that laughter helps your immune system. So watch something silly that makes you giggle. Preconceptual care. All truth passes through 3 stages. First, it is ridiculed. Second, it is opposed. Third, it is accepted as being self-evident. And I think the time has come where preconceptual care is now becoming self-evident. And this is my book, The Key to Healing and Fertility Through Nutrition, Thorson's. ISBN, I don't know, too many numbers, but it's available on amazon.co.uk. So hopefully that will help you. All the references are in there. So with no more ado, I will thank everybody for coming and thank the NutriCentre for having us here, and say farewell. Want any questions? I don't know where the chap is. Excuse me? Do you know where he is?
Can you get this book here?
Yes, you can order the book here.
from
They've
here?
just run. Yes, they've just run out today. They've sold the last one. Yes, please. So they've run out today.
Question. You mentioned about proteins being important, 75 milligram.
Yes, about 3 or 4 ounces of protein. The research, as I said, shows that too much is as bad as too little.